Welcome to the Evolution 2.0 podcast, where we explore the intersection of art, technology, business, biology, and spirituality. Here you'll discover new trends in evolution that are changing the way we think about everything. This is your host, Perry Marshall, author of Evolution 2.0, 80/20 Sales and Marketing, and Guides to Ethernet, Google, and Facebook. I'm founder of the Evolution 2.0 Prize, a quest for the missing link between earth science, the information age, and life itself. Let's join the conversation now. Perry Marshall here with Jenny Davis, and Jenny is quite a remarkable person. She has a cancer story to tell, but way before we get to that, there's some really interesting background. So she fought for Scotland and Great Britain. Like when I first read that, I'm like, were you in the army? No, as a judo athlete for 16 years, and has a bachelor's in health psychology, and has quite a career as an athlete. Raced for Scotland and Great Britain as a track cyclist, becoming the fastest female sprinter in Scottish cycling history, winning silver at Delhi Commonwealth Games. And then she's a Lean Six Sigma black belt, which that world actually goes well with athletics. It attracts very disciplined people. And she has, turns out, we were introduced by Megan Macedo a few weeks ago, and I had met her at a seminar, but I didn't really know her. But turns out she's been hanging around in our business corner of the world for about a dozen years. So, and then there's a whole story that ensues from there. So this is going to be a very interesting conversation, and especially as we get into the cancer story, just a perspective that is, I think, unique. So, Jenny, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Perry. Excited to be here. So I reckon it must have been about 3 years ago. I got because I was in Planet Perry in your business side. I got your 40-page sales letter helping the first funding round of Evolution 2.0. Well, at least the public one. And I do a regular donation. It's not, we're talking pennies. It's nothing compared to some of your big donations. And that was 3 years ago. And I kind of always thought I would be a fringe player and I would just support in the best way that I could. I never ever thought that I'd be chatting to you 3 years later on your podcast about a cancer story that I went through, which has been, very recent. I'm only just a couple of months out of finishing chemo. So I'm excited to be here and looking forward to sharing a very unique opinion and view and experience, and hopefully help people understand a bit more about why we need to do more.
So what I'd like you to do is give me just a little short cliffhanger cancer piece, just so people know what's coming and why they need to stick to the end. And then I want you to back up and backfill. Okay, who are you and where do you come from, and why your perspective on this is unique. But sure. Give us just a little bit
a trailer.
Yeah.
So I guess you ran through a little bit of my backstory. So was a big athlete, professional athlete for many years. Probably one of the most people that I know say I'm the healthiest person they've ever met. I sit on their health and fitness board of directors for a lot of people just because of the way that I am and have lived for a long time. And I ended up with a bowel cancer diagnosis the second week in January this year, which is 2021. Completely unexpected. Very rare for somebody under 40 to be diagnosed with that. And I needed an emergency operation because I had a bowel obstruction. So I went through I went into the hospital thinking I had like constipation, and then told I was needing an emergency operation that was probably bowel cancer. And that was me going to be cut off from the world for a couple of weeks because of the COVID restrictions. So the last 7 months for me have been um, surgery, post-surgery detox, chemo, and all the chat that comes with chemotherapy, and then post-chemo detox, and then transitioning back into my career and getting my health and fitness back in a good place so I can get back on my bike and do all this fun stuff that I enjoy. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. That's very raw and live because it's only just happened. Like I'm still living it just now at the moment.
Yeah. And so there's multiple unique perspectives, as you're going to hear as we go through this. And the athletic background is part of it, but then there's some other pieces. So it's gonna get fascinating. Now, so back up in athletics or before, like help us get to know you.
So I guess, I was a high energy child, probably would have gone off the rails if my parents hadn't put me into sport. So I ended up in a judo class, which happened to be it randomly was a talent hub for judo in the UK. My parents didn't know that. It just happened to be the club that I lived to closest. And I ended up having, while I went through school and uni, I ended up having a pretty successful kind of judo career through youth and junior ranks, up into the seniors. And it's important for me to call out, I was like a low maintenance athlete. So I was never sick. I was very rarely injured. The physios loved dealing with me because it was like tape up my pinky and let me go, or whatever it was. So generally speaking, for most of my life, I've had very little health issues. I usually had pretty good balance. And I guess across the board, my life was fairly balanced. Sometimes you have to push in particular areas. And then I did health psychology at uni. And the last year of uni, I decided to take a bit of a year off my sporting career, just so that I could finish with a good honours degree in my health psychology. My year off turned into a couple because I was suddenly enjoying what's life like without the professional sport, constant measures. And as a judo player, a lot of it was about weight control. And I was enjoying being with friends and family and having a bit of a life where I could do what I wanted at the weekends. And then a coach that worked across sports disciplines in Scotland suggested that I had some parallels with some of the track sprinters in Scotland. So he suggested that I do a bit of a try it out and maybe do a talent transfer if I enjoyed it. So I fought it for a little while. That's another story how I ended up making the decision to go. But I did a track cycling kind of talent transfer and had maybe 10, 12 years of racing for Scotland and GB, which I juggled with my kind of working career and did all the operational improvements, continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma, kind of that run alongside. So when there was a quiet games period, like London Games, Glasgow, I would have a jump in my working career, and then that would kind of be paused while I did my London or Delhi Games or Glasgow Commonwealth Games. And then I retired to like 2016, I think. So I was able to spend a lot more time on my career helping businesses with their operational improvements. And that probably brings me up to this point. I had probably a big change a couple of years ago in some of my life circumstances changed a little bit, which I think had an impact on what happened with my health next, but we can talk about that if you want to. I don't mind.
Well, I would love to. You're doing good. Just keep going.
Keep going. So I guess, so I had, see, I've had 7 months to reflect on this, and everybody who ever gets cancer always asks the question, why did I get cancer? Uh-huh. And it's especially because I don't meet any of the typical risk factors, especially for bowel cancer. You don't hear about many professional athletes who get diagnosed with it. And so I didn't, I barely drink. I don't smoke. I eat pretty healthy. I was fasting. I was exercising every day. I was walking. I was doing yoga. I had some career stress, but it wasn't like keeping me up at night. And then I had 2 years of career where I was in a transition, and I was still working out what I wanted to do. And I was doing some things that I don't think were true to me as a person, and true to the unique abilities and talents that I have. But I was kind of playing around with it. So I assumed it was just part of the journey. And then I had some, so I don't think I was being true to myself. I wasn't, my normal creative outlet, I wasn't using anymore. So I think my creativity was blocked. And then I had high stress, I think, so most of last year, I had high stress for a number of different reasons. My partner and I, unfortunately, I had 2 miscarriages last year, one at the beginning of the year and one in November, which obviously from an emotional perspective is very, very stressful. And I was traveling quite a lot for work. So my sleep patterns it was like super early flights and then super late flights. So I was getting up at the crack of dawn and missing full sleep cycles. And when you're traveling, your eating is out of sync. So there were a lot of things that from a health foundation point of view, were different. On top of my career's in transition, I'm not being myself. My creativity is getting blocked, plus the emotional stress of going through what we were going through personally. And I wasn't well. The symptoms for me started like December last year, but because I just had a miscarriage, I had assumed that what I was going through was like a knock-on effect from all that stuff. So I didn't seek medical, other than pregnancy support, who thought it was just like hormonal changes and things. I didn't seek medical support until it was, much further down the line. And I was in a lot of pain, and I probably looked 6 months pregnant because my abdomen was so like stretched out and full. And then that took me into beginning of this year, where I got admitted into hospital and was told 2 hours later I probably had bowel cancer. So it's been the last 7 months has been a bit of a journey with the op, chemo, and living with a stoma, because they did a colostomy on me. They removed 30 centimeters of my large intestine, and I have a stoma in the front of my abdomen. Hopefully short term, it's due to be reversed beginning of next year, assuming they don't find any more cancer at the end of this year. So it's been a journey having to deal with all that, and then having a new poo process as well.
Wow. So when you say you were not being true to yourself, like what degree of not true to yourself? Is this like major not true to yourself or minor not true to yourself?
Uh, um, so I think I was in situations where I would lean into doing what I was really good at, and then I was working with people who would pull the reins right back in, and so I had leeway for like a little amount of time, and then they would pull the reins back in, and then it was just like cut dead for I got little teasers of being able to do my best work, but for the majority of the time in my career, which is the bulk of where most people spend their time each working week, um I wasn't playing to my strengths. I was just chugging along with the leaders that I was working with at the time.
Now, are you implying that you think this contributed like to you getting cancer, or is that just background information, or how do you interpret that?
Um, so I think I'm never going to know the truth about why the first cell turned cancerous. And pretty soon after this happened, I spent I went into more detail about the work that you were doing and read Dr. Raza's book on the
Mhm.
first cell, which just completely blew my mind. And I think, I don't have all the normal risk factors. I only know in my gut, which is me not no pun intended. I only know in my gut and my heart, there were only a few small areas where things weren't right. And that first cell is normal until it undergoes consistent stress for a long period of time. So I my theory is it was related to me not being true to myself and not being able to fulfill my full creative potential, and the stress that happened soon after that accelerated that. That's my theory, which I'll never be able to prove or disprove.
Yeah.
But that's where my head is with it just now.
Okay. Well, that's useful, because it seems pretty clear to me that cancer is caused by stress, and there's a million things that can stress people out, including toxic waste dumps and bad food and bad work situations or bad relationships, and so it seems very appropriate to do some introspection, which is exactly what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so when you wrote to me, you had a lot of interesting things to say about chemotherapy. You had more things to say about introspection, and like you've been through this whole thing now over the last 7 months. So, where would you like to start?
Um, so I guess I think in one of your emails you talk about there's an ideal way to treat cancer, and one of the first couple of bullets is like remove it, like cut it out.
Hmm.
So I was fortunate enough that the obstruction in my bowel got so big that it blocked everything, which meant the cancer was found before it got to stage 4, which is where it's spread across multiple organs. And mine's was stage 3B. So it was in my bowel and had worked through the 3 layers of the bowel. And then the only reason I wasn't stage 4 was because it had not spread and they didn't find it anywhere else. So I was on the other side I was on the more serious side, but the obstruction saved me because it stopped another part of my body being able to work, which caused symptoms. So they found it pretty quickly after I had the first kind of set of symptoms. Like I was on the operating table within a month, and they cut it out. And the samples that they took some cells from my bowel, like liquid form, because there was a clear liquid in there, and they sent that to the lab. So there were cancer cells in my bowel that hadn't turned tumorous, and I had 7 out of 48 lymph nodes that had cancer cells in them. So their advice was, we've cut all the cancer out that we can physically see, but we recommend chemotherapy to kill off anything that's remaining that we can't physically see. So I'm sitting in the office like, okay, taking it in, right? Chemotherapy, okay, fair enough. Give me the information on that, like the quick summary. Finish the summary, and then they were like, right, when do you want to sign the paperwork? And they just like threw it. They just like handed me the forms, and I was like, I can't make this decision on the spot right now. That chemotherapy's got a bad rep for side effects, and I do view my body as a temple, so I need to go away and consider it. And I asked the question, what happens if I don't choose to go through chemotherapy? And they looked at me like I had 3 heads. And it was like no one else had ever asked that question before. It was just like, this is the norm. You had cancer in your body. We say you should do chemo, so you should do it. Right. And I went away, had to think about it, spoke to my family and friends. And if I had no one else in my life, I probably would have seriously considered not doing it. But I have a massive support network of people. I was presented with no other option. And I felt I couldn't justify not doing it, because all the other treatment options are there's not enough research or scientific papers to back those. So I didn't have science on my side. I just had what was the treatment that's been done since the 1970s. And that treatment for me didn't even target cancer cells. It just targeted fast growing cells in the body, which are your red blood cells, your white blood cells, and destroy everything that, as soon as they inject it into you, those cells are getting killed off. And it just so happens cancer cells are also part of that group. So it's important for me to say that the support that I got across my surgical team and my oncology, the doctors and nurses there, they gave me the best support they could give me. Mm-hmm. But they're working in a broken system. And to them, there is no other option, because they're stuck in this system that's been in the same place for 50 years. Yeah. So I guess that's my perspective coming into it. There was no other option. And when I asked about it, they looked at me like I was a right weirdo. And like, what do you mean you wouldn't possibly want to not consider chemotherapy? Well, I don't want to put that bleach in my body.
Well, that's the most important thing you said in what you wrote to me. Talk about pouring bleach in your body. Explain
that was so I've got a good friend who happens to be a liver and bowel detox specialist, Miss Ian Bell in Edinburgh. And we did so after my operation, I obviously had a lot of drugs, morphine, anesthesia, and Ian helped me out with a 8-week detox to get rid of all those chemicals out of my system, because anesthesia can stick around in your system for up to 7 years after you've had it. So I had it all detoxed. I probably had the healthiest bowel in Scotland, running into my chemo. And I started my chemo, and the first 2 cycles were, for me personally, were absolutely horrific. I had all the side effects that they talked about, the typical ones, plus some really weird ones that whenever I asked anyone, they just shook their head and said they hadn't heard of that before. And I looked dreadful. And when I spent more time with Ian working through some coping strategies that we could use, we jokingly started calling it chemo bleach, because that was like, there should be a hashtag for it, hashtag chemo bleach. It just was like pouring bleach, killer bleach, into my veins once every 3 weeks, and then taking the tablets just to top it up in case the liquid form didn't do its job. So, there were the side effects. The side effects are different for everybody, but for somebody whose body's a temple, I had very bad side effects because my body's just not used to dealing with those toxins, especially at the intensity that they gave them to me. And actually, in the end, my 3rd and 4th cycles, they had to reduce my dose of chemo because the side effects were worse than the actual disease itself. And I just feel like, we can't keep treating people with drugs and procedures that are worse than the disease itself. That suffering from cancer drugs is considered the norm. That's not acceptable. Like any other situation where you were getting all of those side effects, fatigue, hair loss, hair thinning, neuropathy, nausea, sickness, constipation, diarrhea, issues with your hands. I couldn't drink or take anything that was cold because my throat went into spasm. When I cried, the muscle behind my eyelids went into cramp. Whenever I ate food, the first bite, I got jaw cramp. Like I had all these weird muscle cramp things. In any other situation in life, that long list of side effects, there would be an outcry. But there isn't for cancer drugs. It's just accepted as the norm.
Wow. Well, so first, go ahead.
So I guess I'm in a unique situation because I was diagnosed with cancer, and I didn't survive cancer. The way I view it is I survived chemotherapy. That's my perception of it.
Yeah.
And the people who don't make it and pass away, they can't demand more. They can't demand it because they're gone. Yeah. So the only people who can demand a change are those that lives have been touched from it, who are still here, who have enough belief and energy to be able to stand up and say things like that, which is exactly why I got in touch to have a conversation with you in the first place, because we need to do better. This is like, there's these groups for animal cruelty. Well, chemo is like human cruelty.
Yeah.
And I know firsthand because I spent 4 months dealing with it. And, people maybe watching the video probably don't, I look good considering I only had chemo 2 months ago, but I detoxed massively after it. And I did everything I could health-wise during it to support my body while it was dealing with the bleach.
So first, I salute you for coming on a screen and telling the whole world about your bowels and your miserable 4 months. And I mean, that takes a lot of guts. I would think you probably had to ponder a minute or two before you were sure you're ready to do that.
Well, I for some reason, so I ended up doing like some bowel cancer diary videos on YouTube, probably from about February onwards. And I discovered that I had the kind of people found them really funny considering the circumstances. And it turns out it's because I'm really good at taking the pee out myself. And I think probably 6 months of doing 60 plus videos, I kind of lost the fear a little bit, and know that there's value in sharing this stuff, even though for lots of people it might feel like too much and they just want to deal with it privately. There was there's value in me sharing it. So I appreciate you saying that though.
So the next thing on the list is we need to appreciate the fact that chemotherapy is a really big upsell in the oncology shopping cart.
Certainly is.
And if you don't get your, I mean, I don't know how much it costs in Scotland, but what if they don't get their $60,000? Right?
Yeah.
So there's
a demand, isn't there?
I mean, it makes the CFO of the hospital happy.
Yeah.
How do you detox?
I detoxed. So I had to do it gradually because everyone's bowel was very well, mine's in particular was very sensitive because I was healthy anyway. And you can, if your bowel goes through too much change, too much in a short period of time, it can go into shock. So I did, so there's small habits like I have ginger and water with every meal because ginger aids with digestion. And then I moved to raw food only diet, which, you don't cook any of your veg or anything. It's just fruit and veg completely raw, nuts and things that haven't been processed. And then I ended up doing vegan. I kind of eased back into widening in some more food groups. So vegan and then kind of vegan with fish. I did yoga most days. I did meditation most days. No drinking, no smoking. That wasn't an issue anyway for me. Low stress. Just all the things that, and I did some juices as well. I had a disgusting shot that a juice that I had to make twice a day that had organic ginger and turmeric root juiced, and then a little bit of carrot juice just to push the rest of it through, and then downed with black pepper because you can't absorb everything from turmeric root unless you have some of the properties that come from black pepper. So I was like, I had different shots and different juices that I took. And then there were new supplements that I was taking. Charcoal helps to remove toxins from your body. So I had higher dose of charcoal, and I'm actually still on that just now until I get to probably the end of Q3, just to make sure as much of was pumped into my body's gone. But I guess it wasn't rocket science. There were a few new things that I did, or I just tightened up on some of what I was doing before. But I did that off my own back, with my friend who that was his specialty. So if I didn't have him, or the need and the want to be proactive about it, I probably would still be dealing with some of the side effects from chemotherapy. And well, who knows how long those last for people who haven't done anything like that before.
So you described going down into this trench of pouring bleach in your veins and being completely messed up, what's it like when your body's coming out of that, and how are you, like, you're in touch with your body? Like, maybe we need to say this explicitly, like an athlete who, judo and cycling and all the discipline of being a professional athlete, you're very in tune with your body, much more used to paying attention to all that. So what's that? What signals are you getting? What's that like?
It is, it was always a constant monitoring of how I felt on each day. And the hardest thing was mid chemo, because chemotherapy is done in cycles. So they blitz you and then you get a little rest for your cells to recover, and then you get blitzed again. And this roller coaster was just a nightmare. And the downs become steeper as you move through each cycle. So I actually found the 15, 16 weeks that I did through chemo more difficult than like once it was over. I've never been so happy in my life. I did like a special dance, and I had like some celebratory stuff going on as I took the last tablet. But it probably took me 5 or 6 weeks to feel like my normal human self again. And there were biomarkers that I was tracking just as a person, like my watch does all my sleep patterns. My average sleep and heart rate through this whole experience was 10 to 15% higher than it normally is. So when I'm sleeping, so my heart was having to work 10, 20% harder every single night while I'm resting, just to be able to cope with what was going into my body. My blood cell count was too low on 3 occasions that my next cycle had to be delayed. So all of that, you're right. I'm an athlete, so my body self-awareness is extremely high, and the biomarkers and things they were just the evidence of what I was already feeling as an individual and a person. And I climbed out of it quickly because I had a support network around me, wider than just the medical establishment that I was kind of housed in. I have a wide network of people across 2 sports and multiple industries because of the work that I do, and a wide and deep network of family and friends that were able to support me through that. And I was doing my vlogs, which were cathartic up to a point as well, and helped me reflect on it. So although it was the hardest thing that I've ever had to deal with, and it wasn't uncommon for me to bury myself when I was on the bike to sickness. So I know how to suffer.
Yeah.
And suffer with grace as much as you can when you're being sick. So I know how to suffer. But it was still the hardest thing that I've ever had to go through by a country mile. And if I got told I had to go through it again, there would be a question mark for me.
Well, you said in your email, I'm not a snowflake.
Hell no. Hell no. I am the opposite, whatever that is.
So let's say that your sister called you and said, hey, I got the same thing as you. What should I do?
So right now, I feel like the majority of people are caught between a rock and a hard place, and I was one of those people. And it would be very difficult she'd be in the same position that I felt I was in, where I was given no other option
Yeah.
and no science behind it, behind the other options to be able to support a less invasive but successful treatment. Which is why, part of the reason that we're chatting is because my message is that we need to do better, and we need to do better in the areas outside of the system that your project supports, to accelerate, earlier diagnosis that Dr. Raza's talked about, and other treatment options where the identity of the cell changes back. All of those other options, they're not going to be as invasive and as difficult for people to deal with. And, not everyone's like me. I wasn't sitting in the chemo ward and everyone around, I did not belong in that place. I looked completely like the odd one out. Most of the people looked like they were dying and had much worse side effects than me, in terms of like hair loss completely gone. These people, they deserve better, and it's cruel for money, or just because the system's broken. I don't even know if these people know it's broken, because they're just in it and it's just the norm now.
So then there's this introspection. I've gotten a little bit of a sense that you got more right with yourself, in that you feel like that's significant. Is that right?
Yeah. I asked the question, why did I get cancer? It took me months to be able to work through that. I systemized lots of stuff in my life so that I didn't have some of that stress anymore. And I've spent a lot of time working through, career-wise, what's the right things for me, what my talents and strengths are, which is why I was working with Megan, who introduced us. So I'm in a much better place about my future and how that can connect to, me uniquely as a person and the value that I bring. And there's other kind of changes that have happened which I didn't expect, and I did mention one of them to you in the note that I sent. That I was always a big believer in 80/20. Got your book when it first came out, saw loads of it in the businesses that I worked in, but after this happened, I think my like 80/20 radar got stronger. And so now when I look at situations where I know a lot about, I'm able to go, that's your 80/20, that's your 80/20, that's a marginal, that's a red herring. And I'm far more blunt about that now than I was before. I think before I would say it, but I was quite subtle about it. And, depending on the person, they would either pick it up or completely miss it. So to me, life's too short. And, it's not like I've suddenly got a new sense of, I do have a more perspective in life, but I was very aware of my mortality before this happened to me. And I lived as, each day as if it was my last. That was kind of how I approach life anyway. So it's not like that's changed. It's just now some of the choices and the decisions or the advice and recommendations that I give for business are much more to the point. This is the things you need to focus on. See all of the rest of this a load of crap. and you're getting stressed about it for no reason, just let it go.
I lost a good friend to cancer a couple of years ago, Rob Berkeley, and he's a really astute business coach, really more of a personal coach, kind of, you know, hard to categorize, but brilliant guy. And I talked to one of his very best friends, very close friend, and he says, you know, getting near the end, Rob was absolutely took his gloves off with me. If I was if I was like not treating my family right or not making good decisions, he had no, he's just going to tell me.
Yeah.
And, you know, sounds like Rob beat him up pretty good before Rob left the earth, and that he appreciated it, you know,
Yeah.
very much. Right.
If you're doing it from a good place, then the message is important enough. Why skirt round the edges of it?
Yeah. You mentioned starting to work with Megan, and for those who don't know, Megan is the Brene Brown of marketing. And that probably even pigeonholes her too much, because I don't know, maybe that's what she was 2 or 3 years ago. Now she's just Megan. And she's probably 15 years younger than me, but I sit at her feet and learn. What was that about, and what have you gotten out of it? I have a feeling it has a lot to do with this.
Yeah, I sent Megan a note in February and asked if she was taking on any new clients for like individual. And then I think she opened up her diaries to some new clients like less than a month later. And I think the opening chat that I had with her was, I always knew at some point, because when Megan appeared in Planet Perry, which was probably a couple of years ago, you know, and Megan's like the Celtic cousin to me. She's the Irish, where I'm the Scots. We have the same sense of humor. And, you know, our accents are kind of similar and all that good stuff. And I always got a sense that at some point in life, Megan and I's worlds would clash. And she had, you know, some bits and pieces in her work over the years, and I kind of kept an eye on it. Just the timing wasn't right. And I think maybe February, March, just as I was starting to feel really good after my op, but before I started chemo, I reached out to her and just said, look, I'm in this transition point in my life. The catalyst hasn't been particularly good, and I got some crap to go through, to wade through. But I, you know, would really appreciate spending some time with you. So we've probably had 4 or 5 months of work together, and it's been brilliant. We've you know, had calls on, so Megan's work is, I guess, about being understanding yourself, your stories, how they all interconnect to create your unique juice and what makes you special in a deep way. And then how do you take that and package it into your career? Or it might not be how you make your money, but the things, the pieces of art that you create in the world, whether that's, or projects that you do. So we've kind of moved through the full journey of understanding my background, where I've been completely true to myself right from like age 5 or 6, I think, right through, did the full timeline. She asked me some really philosophical questions, as Megan does. and then left me to go and work through them. And then we'd catch up every month and run through them. So whenever I have calls with Megan, I feel like my brain has just like blown up. It takes me 24 hours to come back to kilter again. And the rest of the time the brain's simmering in the background, figuring out some of the tough questions about me as a person. And I thought I knew myself pretty well, but there were some big things that I've been able to figure out about what truly drives me and why certain relationships or situations in my life work and why others don't, because of some of the things because of the main thing that drives me. And where I have battles in my life, it's because I've got a paradox between what's going on, what drives me versus the situation, and both are good. And it's about finding the balance between the good bits of me and the bits I need to work through and push for progress. So that kind of sounds a little bit fuzzy, but you've gone through the work with Megan, so I guess you personally know. I don't know if the listeners will fully understand what that journey is like.
Well, Megan's work is about understanding your own story. And most of us only have a fragmentary understanding of our own story. Like one of my moments was, Megan said one time, hey, that whole episode when your dad got demoted from his job because your mom, went to see a psychiatrist. That was a war between science and religion, don't you? And I was like, I should have figured that out 20 years ago, but I never realized it until now.
Yeah.
And we all have these things. And, I don't know that understanding your own story is going to keep you from getting cancer or cure cancer or anything like that. But one thing I do know is that we're all healthier in a lot of ways when we can stand back and see the arc of where we came from, what the questions are. Like, your family was asking a set of questions. What was it? Right? Mm-hmm. And where has that brought you? And I just feel like my ability to connect with other people, my ability to understand myself is much better because I've done some of this introspective kind of work. And clearly you're saying the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's allowed me, the place that I'm in now is, now that I understand more about myself and my motives and my stories and why certain things have happened and why I struggle with some things and other things are easy. It allows me to filter in the future. I'm going to do this, or I'm not going to do this, or this relationship isn't good and I need to cull it if it's the type that you can do that. And these people over here are definitely who I should be spending more time with because it's a much better fit for me as a person and what I want to achieve. So it's now empowering me to pick the right things that are the right fit for me as a person. And that can only be a good thing for all the different parts of your life: health and fitness, emotional, intellect, social, financial, career, all those categories. If you're being true to yourself and finding the things that fit even closer to you and your unique abilities and values and people that, that understand those, all of those areas will flourish through time. I have no doubt. I've had little tasters of it through the years. I just got lost for a couple of years in the middle. Like after my sporting career, after I retired, you kind of go through a bit of your identity's changed. And I was still figuring out, without any guide, who I was as a person. And I went down some paths that I probably shouldn't have done. But I was lucky because I got a warning shot before it was too late. And I'm still in my 30s and have got a long life and career ahead of me to, give value and have fun and see what happens.
Is there anything that we didn't get to that you'd like to mention or say before we're finished?
So I guess just to reiterate the points that, the support that I was given in the medical system that's typical in the UK was as best as it could have been, but the system is broken, and the treatment that I had to go through is like human cruelty, and we need to do better. And when I say we, I mean the people that are outside the system. You've talked about the only people who are going to solve this big global problem are going to be people outside of the system, entrepreneurs, that are bringing innovation in from other places, which is the best way to innovate. Those are words that come straight from your mouth. The best way to innovate is to take ideas from one place and apply them in another. And it's that group of entrepreneurs in the community that sits behind things like Evolution 2.0 and the work that you're doing, and the doctors and scientists that you're working with. This is a call that we need to keep doing what you're doing. Just push the fast forward button and hopefully people like me, the more people who share these kinds of stories and experiences will help with the motivation and building a little bit of a wave for you to ride on. That's probably where I'd like to finish.
Well, Jenny, I really appreciate you bearing your soul a little bit and talking about this whole experience you've had, and for being supportive in the work that we're doing here. And it's just fantastic. If somebody wants to look at your vlogs or pay attention to what you're doing, how do they do that?
So my vlogs are on YouTube. Just put Jenny Davis bowel cancer in, and there's string of them will come up. You'll find my channel, so you can subscribe on there. Most of them are pretty, they're fun educational things if people are interested as I've gone through the journey. Or if somebody wants to get in touch personally, is jenny@jennydavis.org if they want to get in touch via email. So yeah, just I hope you've enjoyed the chat and the listeners have enjoyed it, and anybody wants any more information or wants to get in touch, just let me know. Happy to chat.
Very much so. I think these problems are solvable, and I think there are better ways. And thanks for reinforcing that, because we're going to make some dents in this thing.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I have no doubt. And just this is like a little prod for everyone involved.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Perry.
Until next time, this is the Evolution 2.0 podcast, bridging science, technology, business, and the big questions. To ensure you never miss an episode, subscribe on iTunes or on your preferred player. If you like the show, rate us on iTunes. Join our email list and social media at cosmicfingerprints.com.